Chapter 10: Diseases and Immunity. Please remember to go back to the objectives by the end of your studying to make sure that you covered everything you're supposed to cover. Pathogen. It is a microorganism that causes disease. So, any pathogen must cause disease, but not all microorganisms cause disease. What does this mean? When I say bacteria, for example, bacteria can be helpful, like the commensals that live in your gut and give you more immunity, and they have other functions in your digestion, and they can be harmful, like the ones that cause disease. So just make sure that when you're asked what is a pathogen, you say that is a microorganism that causes disease. So they cause disease to who? They cause disease to the host, an organism in which the pathogen lives and reproduces. So what's transmission? It's the movement of the pathogen from one host to another host. What's the difference between transmission and infection? Infection is the entry of the pathogen, no matter where it's coming from, into the body of the host, while transmission means that this pathogen has moved from one host to another host. Okay? Transmissible diseases. There are two main rules for transmissible diseases. First, they are caused by pathogens, and the second is that they move from one host to another host. So in order to call a disease transmissible, it has to be caused by a pathogen and has to be passed from one host to another. Okay, so what are those pathogens? We can group pathogens into four groups: viruses, bacteria, protists, and fungi. Viruses, they cause some of the common diseases that you already know of, like influenza, common cold, poliomyelitis, measles, and AIDS. Bacteria, they cause cholera, syphilis, whooping cough, tuberculosis, or tetanus. These are not the only diseases caused by bacteria and viruses, but they are just some examples. Protists, they cause malaria, amoebic dysentery, fungi, for example, athletic foot, and ringworms. These are some shapes of the different groups of pathogens. So, how do pathogens damage living cells? They either feed on their food or they produce toxins. So, they feed on their food. For example, cells need each nutrient that they receive: proteins to build and repair, carbohydrates to give energy. So what if I took those nutrients? What if there is a pathogen that's taking this nutrient? You will be deprived from the benefit of this nutrient. For example, if there is a pathogen that takes all the carbohydrates that are entering the cell, now I will find a host that's deprived of energy. What about toxins? Toxins are very poisonous, so this will harm the whole body and may cause some organs to shut down. So that's why pathogens are very dangerous. So pathogens, once they spread, they start causing some symptoms that your body starts to warn you by the symptoms. Like what? Rashes, high temperature, and in some other diseases, cough, vomiting. So all of these we call symptoms. Okay, so how do those pathogens spread? How do they move? How do they enter the body? They enter the body, which is infection. How do they infect us? Either by direct contact or indirect contact. Direct contact, like it's from one person to another, that they were in very close and direct contact, like blood transfusion, for example. So those contagious diseases are transmitted by bodily fluids or blood transfusion. Like what? Like HIV that causes AIDS, and such as fungus that goes from one skin to skin, like athlete's foot. These are bodily fluids, and also some dead cells. So this is called the direct contact. Indirect contact, and unfortunately this is how most of the pathogens are transmitted just by eating or drinking unclean food, contact with infected animal, breathing droplets that contain those pathogens, touching a surface that contain those pathogens. So this is what we call indirect contact. Okay, so let's look at some indirect contacts or indirect ways of the transmission of diseases. For example, we have the Salmonella bacteria. It's very dangerous. It affects the alimentary canal and it causes poisoning. So, how does it spread? When you eat fresh, unwashed food that's not washed, especially by clean water. So, how can I protect myself from it? By cooking the food, because cooking destroys this bacteria, and making sure that you get food from a very trusted place. And if you're going to eat raw vegetables, make sure that they are clean and washed with clean water. Okay, influenza or cold, common cold or COVID-19. When someone sneezes or coughs, a lot of droplets that contain the virus get propelled into the air. If someone else breathes into those droplets, they become infected. Also, we have contaminated water. This is another way of the spread of diseases, indirect spreading. Contaminated water contains poliomyelitis virus or cholera bacteria. These are some of the examples of the pathogens that can be present in contaminated water. So make sure you do not swim in contaminated water, you do not drink contaminated water, don't even use it for washing your food or vegetables. So, how does our body defend us? Will we just stand helpless in front of all those pathogens? No. Our body destroys pathogens once they enter it by the white blood cells. Remember when we talked about the function of the white blood cells? Either by phagocytosis or production of antibodies. But will we wait until the pathogens enter our blood to defend ourselves? Actually, no. We have mechanical and chemical barriers that protect our bodies from the outside, like cilia in the nasopharynx area. What is this? This is a mechanical barrier that will push any foreign body outside of our nasopharynx area. Also, we have our intact skin. This is another mechanical barrier that we have. The fatty acids and the commensals that live on our intact skin, they protect us from any pathogens that are from the outside world. So the fats do not only isolate our body to keep our body temperature stable, but also the fatty acids and the layer of fats in our skin protects us and isolates us from the pathogens in the air. We have the commensals or the commensal bacteria, the normal flora that live in our gut. Also, they help us to protect ourselves from the harmful pathogens. Vaginal acids. In females, in their vaginal area, there are some acids that are present to protect the female's body from any outsider bacteria that might enter either during sexual intercourse or just from any contaminated surface. Flushing the urinary tract, so the exit of the urine also flushes or cleans the urinary tract from any contamination that might enter the urinary tract. The rapid change of pH. If I have a pathogen that's adapted to the alkalinity of the first part of the alimentary canal, it will definitely be killed in the low pH of the stomach, the acidity of the stomach. If it could survive this part, it will not survive the rapid change to alkalinity again in the duodenum. So this rapid change, the bacteria or the pathogens will not be able to adapt to, so it will be killed. Mucus lining the trachea. Here we have the trachea. Okay, it's lined with mucus. Mucus acts as chemical and mechanical barrier because it has some chemicals that will kill any pathogens, and also it traps any foreign body or any pathogen to be expelled outside of the respiratory tract. Lysozyme in tears and other secretions. So most of our secretions contain enzymes that will kill any pathogens and prevent those pathogens from entering our body. These are some more details. So here we go. Not only our intact skin, even when our skin is cut, blood clots, when they form, they start to stop any infection from entering. Also, not only the change of the pH, but the stomach acidity itself is capable of killing bacteria. Hairs in the nose, they trap any foreign body and they expel it outside. Also, our body's adapted that if it smells or tastes something that's not good, to tell us this and to warn us that this food is not appropriate for us to eat. So our senses help us protect ourselves. And also we talked about the mucus that is lining our pathways, air pathways specifically. So how do we keep our health? We need to make sure that everything that we drink, eat, is clean, and also to make sure that we maintain our personal hygiene. We make sure that our body is usually clean. Clean water supply. Dirt itself contains a lot of dangerous pathogens. Unclean water will usually contain polio or poliomyelitis and cholera. So most countries, what do? They filter water first and then they treat it with chlorine to kill any microorganism. Other countries, they use deep wells to collect underground water because when water is underground, most probably it's cleaner than the water that's subjected to pathogens from all the other sources. Food hygiene. Before handling food, you need to make sure that you washed your hands, because if your hands have already touched another surface, it might be contaminated with bacteria and viruses that will be transmitted to this food and accordingly transmitted to you. So please wash your hands before touching any food. Keep animals away from food because animals might have harmful bacteria on them that they do not show any symptoms for because their bodies work in a different way. So please make sure that you keep any animals away from the food, and even anything that comes out of this animal, hair, feces, any of the animal's outcomes, please keep them away from the food. Also, this includes the flies, of course, because flies, they just touch feces and rubbish, and then they come and step on the food. So make sure that your food is always covered. Provide suitable temperature. So bacteria, they grow fast in high temperatures. So if you want to keep your food safe, please keep it in low temperature in the refrigerator. And before eating your food, please make sure that you cook it with high temperature to kill any bacteria. Keep raw meat away from other food. So if you're going to use a cutting board, the cutting board that you use for raw meat, do not use for fresh vegetables that you're going to use as a salad, or you're going to consume as a salad, for example, because some bacteria that's in raw meat will not be killed until this meat is cooked. So please make sure that you keep them away from each other. Any raw vegetables that will be eaten raw, please keep them away from raw meat. Personal hygiene. Why do we need the personal hygiene? Because in order for your skin to stay supple, which means flexible, and waterproof, it needs, as we explained before, fats or fatty acids. So we have fats that are excreted on the top of our skin, and we have also sweat excreted on the top of our skin in order to keep our body temperature stable and to cool down the body. So they have their own functions, yet they collect dirt. But while skin oil and sweat are doing their job, they also collect dirt, and this dirt contains pathogens. So I need to make sure that I wash my skin regularly with soap and shampoo to avoid keeping this dirt on the skin that might contaminate my food or contaminate my skin, and then I touch my eyes or touch any of my openings, and then I will get this bacteria inside of my body. So please make sure also to brush your teeth in order to kill any bacteria that might cause tooth decay or bad breath. So this is how I provide myself with a healthy body. Now, how do I get a healthy environment? The first important point in getting a healthy environment is by making sure that we dispose our waste in a healthy way. So what's the problem with our waste anyway? So waste food, cardboard, paper packing, any of these, when it's left out in the open, it starts collecting pathogens and harmful insects. So leaving our waste out in the open will cause those chemicals to come out of the rubbish due to the decay of the rubbish, and they are going to be very harmful to the environment. They are going to pollute the ground and also all the waterways. So what do? We create landfill sites. So what's a landfill site? It is where the waste is regularly collected and taken to avoid the risk of infection and pollution. So what do? First, we make this rubbish compact. We decrease the size of the rubbish. And then we will put this amount of rubbish into a landfill site where we can collect the methane gas that comes out of it, so that instead of being a harmful gas that's harming the environment, we collect it and we use it as a fuel. So here we go. This is a proper landfill site where it's closed, and we're making sure that nothing is escaping out of it. And here are the pipes collecting the methane gas, monitoring the well water or the groundwater around it to make sure that everything is going properly. Sewage water. Sewage water also must be treated. Why? Because it contains urine, feces, toilet paper, detergents, oils. It contains all of the unwanted things that we don't want in our water. So that's why sewage water usually is contaminated with cholera and poliomyelitis. Untreated sewage water is called raw sewage, but treated sewage water, after it's filtered and treated with chemicals, can be returned back to rivers or to running water in order to be recycled or reused. Okay, COVID-19. So this is a pandemic that was just a few years ago, and we might need to know some more information about COVID-19. So here we go. It looks like a sphere with protein spikes coming out of it, and these protein spikes help it to attach to the human cells. So what was the problem with COVID-19? Why was it very dangerous? It was very dangerous because it was highly transmissible. It was very easy to get transmitted from one host to another by very simple ways like sneeze, even talk, cough, or even when it stays on the surface, it can be transmitted to another host. Why do we call it a pandemic? Because it was present all over the world at the same time. In most people, this virus caused mild symptoms, but the problem is, in some people, it caused very severe lung symptoms, and the lung was affected badly. So that's why the governments started to close any places where people get in close contact together or even in direct contact together. Also because Some people didn't show any symptoms, yet they were able to transmit the disease. So that's why a lockdown was necessary. So the medical staff were focused on two things: finding a treatment and also predicting what happens next, because viruses can change easily. They change form on a very short time. So they wanted to make sure that nothing changes, or when something changes, they are ready for it. Also, governments started to test people every 14 days because, as we said before, some people were infected but they didn't show any symptoms, and when they found someone that's tested positive, they kept this person at home for a long time, for 14 days, to make sure that he will not transmit the disease to someone else. Let's answer some questions on this chapter. What's an example of a transmissible disease? It is HIV, which is the virus for AIDS, by direct transmission. These actions may be important in controlling the spread of a disease. Washing hands after going to the toilet and disposing water frequently, using separate cutting boards for meat and salad, disposing raw sewage in the river. So let's use it as, or let's make it as true or false. Which ones will be helpful in controlling disease? Washing hands after going to the toilet, disposing waste frequently, using separate cutting boards. But what about raw sewage? Will this be healthy to dispose raw sewage in the river? Of course not. We can only dispose treated sewage. So now the answer will be very easy to know. So please, when you have such a question, answer it this way, because this will help you find the answer easily without getting confused. Now let's answer a paper 3 question. What term is used to describe disease-causing organisms? It is pathogens. Figure 6.1 shows some virus particles that cause the transmissible disease influenza. So here we go. These are shown in the figure. Suggest how the virus particles that cause influenza are transmitted from one person to another. There are a lot of ways by which influenza can be transmitted: droplets, sneezing, coughing, body fluids, inhaled airborne droplets. All of these are ways. Describe the defenses of the body which prevent or fight infection. We will talk about any 3 from the following. Why specifically 3? Because the question is out of 3 marks. So please make sure that you see the number of marks before you write your answer. Any of our chemical and mechanical barriers will be successful, or will give you the 3 marks. Any 3 of them, of course. Explain why antibiotics are not successful in treating influenza. Of course, because influenza is caused by a virus, while antibiotics are only used to kill bacteria. But now he wants 2 points, so please mention both: that influenza is a virus, and also that antibiotics do not kill viruses. Okay, please know that OWTTE means only what the examiner expects. So please stick to the terminology and to the keywords and the concepts taught in the syllabus. Avoid providing overly irrelevant information, something that's not related to the question. Focus on the precise answer that the examiner is expecting from you. And good luck, thank you, and I hope this video helps you study.